All right, so this is looking at the principles of sensation. Now, sensation in short is the information we take in from our five senses. What we see, what we smell, what we touch, what we hear, and all that other good stuff, taste and all that. And as we take in this information, so this is all step one. We take in the information. The second step, which is what we'll look at next time, is how we start to make sense of all this information, how our brain will, in essence, interpret this and try to come up with a meaningful experience. And by meaningful, I don't necessarily mean like deep and insightful and earth shattering. It literally meaning in the literal meaning of the word, like what is happening to me. But that'll be more next time. So this is kind of a two-parter, just a little FYI. All right, so the first thing to kind of look at is some basic vocab. Sensation versus perception. So, sensation, your nose, eyes, other sensory organs are going to be bringing in information. And then when it comes to your perceptions, what you think of as reality is, in essence, your brain taking all that information and making sense of it. Kind of like what I said earlier, but this is kind of the textbooky definition, but shortened. And yeah, so that's that. So as we take in this information, we have what's called top-down processing and bottom-up processing. So top-down processing is guided by experience, high-level processes. We see what we expect to see, again, kind of based off of our experiences, what we have learned in life. So you take an experienced hiker, he goes off into the forest. He expects to see snakes, and so a windy stick, a lizard, they can all look like snakes. You're kind of already expecting it, so in essence, you are going to be um, kind of putting that label on top. Bottom up processing is you're in essence putting everything together. You're taking the pieces parts, and then your brain kind of fills it in and creates it from there. So same idea. You take somebody, they're hiking, they see a long, slim, slithering creature on the ground. They process that information. Oh crap, it's a snake. So this is one. So again, if you've ever been in those situations where you are somewhere new, you see something you've never really seen before, so you start to try to put it together, and then eventually, oh, that's what that is. Now, this can be a really quick process, maybe like 1, 2, 3 seconds, but that is bottom up processing. And again, top down processing, this is where you're going off and you're already kind of expecting to see this. So again, this is how this stimuli is supposed to work, especially when it comes to perception, which is what we'll look at a little bit more detail next time. So some names that are involved is you have Gustav Fechner, and he is the founder of what we call psychophysics. And this is the study of the relationship between stimuli, um, specified in physical terms usually, and the sensations as well as the perceptions that invoked by that stimuli. So if you've ever had an experience where you smell something, maybe it smells like cookies or something, and then you remember, oh, that's my grandma, or is this, or is that, or you maybe hear a particular song and then you immediately think of a movie or something like that. That's psychophysics in a nutshell. So how do the sensations in essence kind of change our perceptions a little bit and what comes to mind when we think of stuff? Then you got David Hubble, and he discovered how individual brain cells convey information that enables us to see the world. Um, and this is kind of where we find the visual cortex in the brain and that kind of stuff. But yeah, these two guys are really kind of important for that. And again, they all kind of apply their own things. And again, they start the process of us kind of understanding how sensation and perception work together. And then some other names, you got Ernest Weber, and his work was sensory response to weight, pressure, temperature, and he helped us come up with the idea of absolute and difference thresholds, as well as Weber's law. He has his own law. And we'll kind of talk about that in a little bit. And Torsten Wesel studied cortical development and vision. And this is actually important because as humans, we're pretty visual creatures. Like, we understand the world through sight. Because again, try to describe the color purple without using the word purple or without referring to anything else that is purple. So, for example, trying to describe the color purple to a blind man. There you go. So again, as humans, we're very visual, and there's a lot going on just with our vision. Even the way our eyes are set up is actually kind of interesting, because the fact that our eyes are in front, like where they are, actually means that we're a predator. Like, we eat other animals. Because if you look at like a rabbit or something like that, they're prey animals. Their eyes are kind of like on the side, and that is so that way they can get a wider view. So like, our range of vision is more narrow than a rabbit, but because our range is more narrowed, and the way our eyes are, that actually enables us to make things out actually more sharply than a rabbit. So going back to Weber a little bit. So these are kind of the definitions of absolute threshold, difference threshold, Weber's law. So absolute threshold, in short, is the minimum stimulation needed to register that stimulus. There you go. Roughly about 50% of the time. So the minute you hear something, the minute you smell something, the minute you taste something, that is your absolute threshold is being crossed. So like, for example, say you're walking down the hallway and you're walking with someone, and maybe you smell something that's not there, or you smell something that your friend cannot smell. Like, maybe you're going by the bathroom and somebody had a bad case of bad taco meat or something, and you smell something where like, oh, something smells kind of like rank, and then your friend is like, I don't smell that. Well, that's because for you, that odor crossed your absolute threshold, but it did not for them. Your difference threshold is the minimum difference between two stimuli required for detection about 50% of the time. So really just a fancy way of saying this. When do you notice the music being turned up? Or when do you notice the music being turned down? That is the difference threshold. And this is where you get the idea of just noticeable difference, or J&D for short. And so if you ever, like, when you were a little kid, you were in bed, or your parents were in bed, but they let you stay up and watch TV because it was summertime or something. And you're watching TV. Your parents come out and tell you to turn it down. It's too loud. You're interrupting their sleep. So you turn it down a little bit, but it's not good enough. That's because for you maybe notice the difference. It is quieter. But for your parents trying to sleep, it did not change. So the sound is literally the same for them, but it is different for you. Again, there's a lot of things that kind of apply into that, wall, atmosphere, all that other good stuff. But that's, in essence, what's happening. And Weber's law is pretty much, the definition is to be able to tell the difference between degrees of stimulation. Two stimuli must differ by a constant minimum percentage. That is a very textbooky way of saying, if it is very, very loud, it will require even more or even less for you to notice the difference. Again, I'll post another video about kind of demonstrating these three things, because me talking about them like this, probably not so great. But these are, in essence, what he discovered. And again, this applies to your sight, what you smell, what you hear, what you taste, what you touch, all the other good stuff. And also, when it comes to sensory transduction, this translation of sensory stimulus into neural activity, pretty much with signal detection theory, is a theory predicting how and when we detect the presence of a faint stimulus amid background stimulation. So in short, two kind of conditions: strength of the signal, how loud it is, bright it is, whatever, and our psychological states, our experiences, our expectations, motivations, how alert are we, all that other stuff. So this is actually kind of where like things like hypnosis and stuff like that come in, because hypnosis is real. It's a real thing. Um, but the thing with hypnosis is, no, I'm not going to turn you into a secret serial killer. And no, I'm not going to open up whatever weird things to get you to do whatever. What it is a focus thing. So if you have ever sat and you watch TV and you lost track of the time, or maybe someone said something to you, but you did not even register they said something, or something happened in the room and you did not even register it. So that's your psychological state. And that is impacting the neural imagery that you're taking in. Because what's happening is what you think of as reality is actually a simulation created by your brain. Now, before I start going all matrixy on you, what this means is this. You see me right now. You see this PowerPoint. You see this video. You don't actually see this. What's happening is the light is reflecting from your screen into your eye. That light is hitting the back of your eye, the retina. And that retina is pretty much, with all the rods and cones and everything else that make up the back of your eye, it is taking that information, breaking it down into electrical impulses, sending it to your brain via the optic nerve in the back to your brain, where it is sent to your visual cortex, where that will be reassembled into an image that you see. And then you mix and match that with the sound, the tactile senses, everything else that's going on. You holding your phone watching this, you type it on your computer while you watch this, the audio of me talking coming in, all of that gets put together, and boom, there you go. That is reality. Kind of scary when you think about it. So this is kind of where, again, sensory adaptation starts to come in. Because if you've ever been nose blind, there you go. That's really what it is. So like maybe, maybe you've been in those situations where, like, long time ago, I went to a friend's house. I was in high school at the time. I think I was a senior. And he had 2 ferrets. Nice guy, but he had 2 ferrets. His house smelled like ferret. I went in, we opened the front door, we walked in, it was like wham, right in the face, ferret. And he had gone nose blind to it. Like, he did not smell it. I did. That is sensory adaptation. So sensory adaptation pretty much says that it's diminished sensitivity to stimuli as a consequence of constant stimulation. So if you're around something all the time, you're going to adapt to it. Now, a couple theories behind this. Evolutionary psychologists suggest that once we notice and evaluate a new stimuli, smell, touch, taste, whatever, as non-life threatening, we pay less attention to it. Because again, our brains, in short, going back to the brain a little bit, our brains take in a lot of information, and our brains do a lot of things. Again, like right now, your brain is, one, helping you take in this video, but it's also regulating your heart rate, regulating your lungs, regulating your blood pressure, digesting your most recent meal, keeping you from boo-booing yourself. Our brain is doing a lot of things, controlling all those different muscles and everything else. Even things we don't realize we're doing, our brain is controlling it. Because again, when was the last time you actually controlled the stomach acid spewing all over your dinner? So our brains do a lot. Because our brains are doing a lot, from an evolutionary psychologist perspective, one of the things that they're having to do is they're constantly regulating everything. Is it a threat? Is it not a threat? If it is not a threat, our brains will start to tune it out a little bit. Because it's like, okay, it's not a threat. I need to focus that mental energy onto something else that might be threatening. Or even a basic thing where it's like, okay, I'm hungry. I'm going to seek out food. Well, how do we seek out food? Sometimes we'll smell. We'll go to the pantry. We'll get something. Maybe we'll get some milk. We open it. We smell it kind of rancid. So we We go, ew, the milk is bad, even before we taste it. So, and again, the idea is this saves our attention for new incoming stimuli or changes in the existing stimuli. And again, this is adaptive for survival. So, you're outside. You start to notice, it's getting a little chilly. Well, if it gets too cold, you can get sick. And, if it gets too cold, you freeze to death. Or the vice versa. It starts warming up. Oh, crap. Now it's getting really hot. Feeling sick. Now I'm burning alive. There you go. That's how all this stuff works. And then we organize all this information. So we're taking in the information, and then we're going to start moving kind of into the realm of perception a little bit, but we're not quite there yet, because we're going to start taking all this information and we're going to start organizing it. And so again, these are kind of the Gestalt principles that are there. So common, proximity, continuity, closure, symmetry, similarity, common fate. These are those principles. But again, the simple fact that one, you can read these words, two, you can understand what I'm saying, it would be, I'm following certain Gestalt principles that we all understand. So if I were to say over pig, boy, hand, forest, king, whatever, you're going to think I suddenly have Tourette's or something. Because I'm saying words that are not in a logical Gestalt way that follows the patterns that you have and I have been brought up and raised in society through learning and everything else in order to make sense of these words. And then we organize all this information. So things like depth perception. This is why we have two eyes. So that way we can have our depth perception, being able to see things in a three-dimensional world. And so again, even something like this, a little bit of riddle. Which person is biggest? Now, just looking at the kind of situation, yeah, this one, right? This person, the third person, let me get my little marker. There we go. This person is biggest. But he's not. They're actually all the same. But what's happening is the other information is being organized and your brain is interpreting it in a way that says this third one, this one that I circled in red, this is the third one. This person is biggest. And this is how we start to organize all this information. So we look at things like relative size, interposition, relative height, shading and contour, textile and gradient, a linear perspective, motion parallax. All of these things are how we begin to organize all of this sensation that's coming in. So when you see something, there you go. When you go and buy a cheeseburger and you pick it up and you bite it, what do you expect to what do you expect? You expect to taste meat. You expect to taste cheese. You expect the hamburger to have a certain texture to it that is right. Like if you were to take a bite of the hamburger and the meat is slimy, that tells you that is something that will quickly come to your attention. Your brain is going to fire off going, wait, that's not right. That's not normal. A hamburger patty should not be slimy. If it is, something's wrong. Unless that orange or not orange, purple slime from McDonald's or something. But again, these are those things we look for. And then we have what's called change blindness, and this kind of last little idea that I will talk about. But this is failing to notice changes in the visual environment. So pretty much they did kind of a little experiment. So it says, while a white-haired man provides directions to a construction worker, two researchers rudely pass between them, interrupting his vision. And the original worker switches places with another one. And when the two researchers get out of the way, yeah, about 67% of people fail to notice the change. But yeah, that's that idea of change blindness. So this is how, again, when we take in this information, we start to organize it. But then we can also start to forget it and stuff like that. So These are, but these are some things that go into like that can hinder us starting to notice. Because again, remember, our brain's taking a lot of information. Our brains, in and of themselves, consume roughly, I forget the exact number, about 60% of all of our body's energy. So everything we breathe, eat, drink, all that stuff, that is going, 60% of that is going to our brain. And as these things go to our brain is going to try to find shortcuts. So you think you're paying attention to something, but maybe you miss something. Maybe you're focused on one particular thing and you miss something else. This is where you run into things like the monkey business illusion. If you have never seen that, just type in monkey business illusion on YouTube and that'll take you to that. That was a real illusion where you are so focused on one thing that you actually miss other things. And from there, but the main takeaway is this. We are taking in a lot of information and we have to make sense of this. All right. So making sense of it, that comes in a little later. But even before we start making sense of it, we have to kind of already start the process of organizing it. So when you hear a sound, when you hear somebody talking to you, notice that the way someone sounds is different from when they're right next to you to when they're when they're on the opposite side of the room, or even like down the hallway, or on the other side of a larger conference room or something like that. Those little cues, those little things that we notice, tie into our absolute threshold, difference threshold, Weber's law, all that stuff is there. And then on top of that, the things we take in, we got to start interpreting it a little bit. And then how do we interpret it? So again, you're driving down the road. You see a red light. What does that mean? What do you do? Again, that's that more perception side, but this is the thing we're ultimately leading up to. All right. So I'm going to pause this here. And again, next time I'll kind of look at more of the perception side of things when we actually start making meaning and sense of this stuff. And aside from that, I really have nothing left to say. I am out.